Hi, this is Chris Parker, and this is a special video blog post for Sam and his website lingholic.com, which is a website with loads of useful information and tips on learning foreign languages, and I'm a big fan of it. Sam wrote a post on his site called Thinking in a Foreign Language, How to Do It and Why. And I was really encouraged by this post because it really emphasized a lot of what I believe about foreign language learning, and it's actually quite similar to a lot of the points I made in my original video on learning Chinese approximately 2 years ago. What Sam said about surrounding yourself with the foreign language in as many ways as you can and making it a part of your life. I think this is absolutely spot on, and in this video I want to give my own perspective on the other thing that he wrote about, which is how to improve your speaking ability in the foreign language. Here in China, where more people learn English as a second language than the number of people who speak it as a first language in the world, it's very common that students who've studied English for about 15 years or even more, they're very good at reading and maybe okay at listening as well, but they're not very good at writing, and they may be very, very poor at speaking or have next to no ability at speaking. So you have a big disparity between their reading and listening ability and their speaking ability. I think this is largely because a lot of the learners have not been employing these techniques which Sam has been talking about, and they don't think in the foreign language, and they don't use the foreign language at all, and they never make this passive book knowledge active. People often ask me, they say, I've finished my beginner's course, I've got to the end of the book, what do I do now? And I usually say, well, listen to the CD a few more times and then pick up a couple more beginner's courses. Because one course isn't going to give you everything. You need to get a good foundation. Read through the texts and listen through the CDs multiple times to try and pick up more. But there needs to be something else you can do after you finish your beginner's courses to get from being a beginner to somebody who can not just understand the language but speak it confidently. So to do this, I think we need to practice and consolidate the knowledge that we've learned in the beginner's lessons. We need to join the dots, as it were. We need to start using and practicing the bits of vocabulary and grammar and expressions that we've already learnt. Otherwise they're going to remain as little dots of knowledge and we won't be able to get our head around them. If you don't do this process, it's like reading a book about driving a car without ever getting behind the wheel, or it's like reading about Mozart without ever touching a piano. As Sam says on his blog, this is where you need to get out of your comfort zone. Now, it's normal for language learners to excel in beginners courses or beginners classes and then face conversations with native speakers and not know what to say or get lost for words. That's why I take Sam's principle of practicing speaking on my own first. After all, you wouldn't go driving through a city without taking lessons in driving or practicing, so why should learning a language be any different? It isn't very realistic to read a book or two and then assume that when you talk to somebody, conversation in the foreign language will automatically flow. So here is my method for getting a beginner more confident at speaking a language. So with this video I'm providing a series of themes. So if you take each topic and each theme and then mentally think up things to say and answers to the questions in your own native language, then you will think of the expressions and vocabulary that you're used to using in your own language. Every time you think of a phrase or a word that you don't know, go to a dictionary and look it up, or work with example sentences that you can find. And then you can even write down the new words or vocabulary that you think of as you're thinking up your responses. After you've written down a list of new words and expressions to help you, then go back to the beginning and try to give this little speech in the foreign language, to say what you've thought of on the topic using the foreign language. This will force you to get speaking and then get used to turning your thoughts and expressions in your native language into a foreign language. So this will give you a practice for the kind of topics that you're going to use in real life conversations. There's no harm in doing this practicing or this rehearsal first before you do the real thing, as it were. So it's important to speak out loud when you're at the beginner stage and not just rely on listening to CDs that come with books. Try to make each speech that you compose at least 5 minutes long. You can practice it several times first in your head, but it's important to speak out loud. You can write it down as well if you want, but it would be a good idea once you've got something that you can say on each topic to try and make a recording either on your computer or with a mobile phone. It's very easy as well. This whole process of learning to express yourself and talking out loud will seem very difficult and unnatural at first, but the more practice you do, the more your conversation will start to flow and the better you'll get at expressing yourself. So here are some topics you can work on. The more of them you can think through and record in the foreign language, the better. They're listed roughly in order of relevance for the foreign language learner. But the most important thing is to make it personal to yourself. Some of the words you use in your everyday life may not be the ones that you've come up with in your language courses. So as most of conversation, well, a lot of conversation anyway, is being curious about the other person that you're talking to, you can also think of how to ask the questions to the other person, or how to put these questions into the foreign language as well. If you're really good at asking questions, then you won't have so many awkward pauses when you're coming up against a native speaker. So that will make your conversation easier. So let's have a look at the topics we can look at. First of all, everyday essentials. What have you done today? Where have you been? What did you do at work today? Where are you going tonight? What are your plans for the weekend? What did you do after you got up today? What shopping did you do? Did you sleep well? What time will you go to bed today or get up? Have you had a busy day at work? Yeah, so you could speak about that for 5 minutes or so, and you could do that for different days, as you may have had different experiences on different days. Secondly, your job. What is your job title? What responsibilities do you have? And what projects are you working on at the moment? What is your team like? For example, how did you get into this job? Was it an accident, or what was the process? Where else have you worked? What kind of companies? What interests you most about your job? What do you like or dislike about it? Number 3, your interest in the country or language. When did you start learning whatever language you're learning? Why did you start learning it, and how? Who's taught you? Did you go to classes? Did you read books? Who have you spoken to? What do you like about the language or the country or its culture? What places have you visited? Where have you traveled to? How many times? Do you have friends from the country? How long have you lived there for? And what kind of cultural experiences? I'm sure there's a lot that you could say about your interest in the language, because after all, if you're learning a foreign language, you must have some kind of interest in the culture or the language itself. Okay, so what number are we on now? Number 4, your hobbies. What are your passions outside work? Maybe you can talk for about 5 minutes on each topic. How did you get interested in your specific hobby? What is it about it that you are passionate about that gets you going? When do you get the chance to practice it, and how are you going to develop this hobby in the future? So you can talk a lot about the development of your hobby. If it's something you're really interested in, you should be able to think of a lot of things to say about it. But it's good to practice this. Your country or your hometown. Where exactly are you from? Not just what country, but what region, what place. What is your hometown like? What do you dislike or like about your country? Did you move to a new place to work or study? And what was that like? What do you think of where you live? And what places do you like to visit, or where do you get out? Yeah, so these are all things that you could think through. Next would be travel. Yeah, do you like to travel? Do you get to travel on your job? What places have you visited? And maybe you can talk about some of your trips or some memorable travel experiences that you've had. Okay, so these are kind of the basic topics you might want to think through. And then if you're at a higher level, depending on your ability, you might be able to think through some more advanced topics. For example, social issues. Yeah, can you describe a piece of news that you've seen recently, that you've read about in a foreign language or in your own language? Can you talk about an interesting thing that you've read about or seen recently? What are the advantages and disadvantages of something? Yeah, do you disagree or agree with what people say about a certain topic? So think about what topics or what issues you're interested in, and then practice talking about them. Yeah. So I think by producing monologues and thinking through these kind of topics in the foreign language before you get to a country is going to help you hugely in having conversations. Firstly, it's going to give you a lot of vocabulary and expressions that you might use commonly, that you might not have learnt in your beginner's courses, that you'll think through. And secondly, it's going to give you things to say so that you're not going to be so nervous, or you're not going to be so lost for words when talking to native speakers. When you actually visit a foreign country, you might find that you need to ask for something in a hotel, or you're at a station and you actually forget some of the simple phrases that you learnt when you started learning the language at first. But this is actually completely normal as well. That's why it's a good idea, if you're going to a place where the language is spoken, to think through in advance what situations you might be in, or where you might have to use the language before you get there. It's even a good idea to flick through a phrase book again on the plane or on the way over. Don't worry if you don't just start speaking a language naturally without any preparation. It's normal that you have to work up for it. Everybody has to go through this process. So that would be my advice to you on learning to speak a foreign language with more confidence. Obviously, if you can find native speakers to talk to online, or if you have friends, that's even better. But some people don't have the luxury of access to native speakers to practice with. So good luck with your studies. If you're interested in Chinese, my website, Fluent in Mandarin, also has a lot of tips on learning Chinese and some of my own courses and materials. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to check out Sam's website, lingholic.com. Alright, see you all soon.